Hey guys, today is Wednesday, June 5th, about 4:45 in the afternoon. I was going to go on to chapter 2 today, which covers my middle school years, but I realized after watching the video a couple times that I needed to go deeper into the relationship with my father. Because my relationship with my father informed a great deal about how I viewed the world, how I responded to the world, why I was so angry. And so, I felt like that needed to be more deeply investigated. I haven't done a lot of reading on Sigmund Freud. My degree is in psychology, but I know that the basis of his theories were that things that the improper development in childhood is what leads to the majority of dysfunction in adulthood, and I buy that wholeheartedly because my family is dysfunctional. All of my siblings have some issues, one way or the other. Whether it's anger, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's control. We were all affected, and we're all now just trying to find our way because none of us got the foundation that we needed when we were kids. One of my dreams is to open a string of community centers. I thoroughly believe that if we do a better job of raising our kids with love and respect, that our world will change. I do believe that, that song, the greatest love of all, the children are the future. And I think I'm about to get interrupted. I just heard the doorbell. I started to do this earlier, and the DSL guy, the internet guy, came, and I stopped. And the access is in my closet, so I'm about to get interrupted. But anyway, so my dad was, I now realize as an adult, just a terrified kid. I think he stopped growing somewhere around 10 or 11 and was stunted, and the way that he treated people, the way that he interacted with people was like a child. And I understand it now, but boy did it create some issues with me growing up because I didn't understand it then, I used to call my father abusive. I don't do that anymore because I understand what abuse is, and I think that referring to what was with my father, what my father did, as abuse is disrespectful to people that really endure true abuse. He was emotionally abusive. No child should ever be scared of their parents, like terrified. And I'm talking about pissing your pants on your way home because the teacher called. And some other kid's going to get grounded or get a timeout or get a little spanking, and you're going to get your ass whooped. And then after the ass whooping, there's no sit down and let me talk to you, let me tell you what you did wrong, let me tell you why I spanked you. There was no I love you, this hurts me more than it hurts you, that whole line. None of that. Go limp off and cry somewhere until you're done crying, and when you come back I don't want to see any tears. That's not discipline. And Scott Peck taught me in The Road Less Traveled that undisciplined discipline is worse, than no discipline. And that's what happened. We got a bunch of mixed messages and a lot of confusion and a lot of turmoil growing up about love and about trust and about family. And I think me and all my siblings are still trying to work that out, and I firmly believe that good parenting, typically produces functional adults. Life happens and you can't always protect against everything that's going to happen, but, you give yourself much better chances when you have a household, you raise a child in love. So I'm the most like my father. I've been told a few times recently that I'm starting to look more like my mom, and that's okay by me. But they're both attractive people, so but I look just like my father. I walk just like my father. Pigeon-toed and bow-legged. I was the only one of his kids that played baseball consistently. My father was an incredible baseball player, actually. Had some minor league tryouts and stuff like that. My father was also a martial artist, and I was the only one that, my brother did a little karate, but I got my black belt for 2 different schools. So I was a lot like him in a lot of ways, yet I was terrified of him. And it was really confusing, we'd go out to the park and play baseball for hours, and, I didn't just play, I pitched like he did. I had a curveball that, as they say in the game, would fall off the table, look like the ball was just going and it just fell off of something, And, I played baseball till I was 16. But, and my father, spent a lot of time with me. He taught me how to pitch. He hit me a lot of balls and all that. I don't remember seeing him at one game, though, because he worked all the time. I know he made one basketball game in high school. That was senior day. And I kind of had to make an appointment with him about that. You know, listen, they're going to give me flowers and all that kind of stuff. All the parents are going to be there. And I'm not saying he didn't want to be there. He was working, but there was this trade-off here that he wanted to present this image to people when the house in and of itself was falling apart. The household was a mess. As I got older and I started sharing with friends, especially friends that had been his students in school, they were like, "What, Mr. Tryman? Nah, no way." And I'm like, "Yeah, you have no idea. This guy that's this great barber, this great teacher, and all these kids love him, and, coaching baseball and all that. Like, y'all don't know what goes on at home, He tried very hard to keep me from my mother's side of the family, including giving us a list of chores on Saturday mornings, which is when he was at the barbershop. So to keep my mother from bringing us around her family, he gave us a list of chores that were to be done by the time he got home at 2 o'clock, or else there was definitely no allowance and probably a spanking. A beating. There's a difference between a spanking and a beating, and my father beat us. And that's, some of the stuff that informs my beliefs about raising kids now, I believe in spanking very, very, very limited. Like when kids are kind of too young to be talked to or to be disciplined in other ways, but that can hurt themselves, can stick a penny in an outlet, or can go out unlock a door or something like that, or tell you no. I believe firmly in nipping that stuff in the bud. I am a disciplinarian, but it's got to be rooted in love. And I didn't feel that. As an adult that has spoken to people that are friends with my father, I get that he loved us. But the way that he loved us was not very loving. It was rooted in fear. It was rooted in control. And I only found out about 2 years ago that his mother was an alcoholic. She died before I was born. I never met her. And he always painted this, ideal picture of her. And as an alcoholic that has been in the rooms of AA and has heard, the regrets and laments of alcoholics and what they've done to their children while they were active, I can only imagine what my father had to endure, And I think that somewhere around 10, 11, 12 years old, he stopped growing. His growing was stunted, and he became so deeply rooted in fear and felt that fear, that control and anger were the only things, that could, make life feasible. I know for a fact my father doesn't believe in God, A, through his behaviors, but also through conversations that he's had with my brother where he said it in no uncertain terms, that he went to church in case he ever needed a character reference or, something along those lines. It was the upstanding thing to do, but it wasn't about a relationship with God. So I had all these issues growing up, going through puberty, trying to figure out, where I stood with him. I mean, this is a guy that I idolized. I wanted his approval. I wanted him to hug me. I wanted him to love me, and I just didn't know how to do it. I felt like I always fell short, and that there was this, it was just impossible to please him. And as I tried to form a relationship with God in a patriarchal society, which has taught us that God is male, that God is a father figure, how could I trust God when my example of a father, is not trustworthy, is somebody that I'm fearful of, somebody that I'm scared of, When I get to the end of the book, I'll talk about the effect that the book The Shack had on me. I've already spoken about it once, and that gave me the lenses through which to view my father in a way that I could forgive and that I could find some peace. But when my 20s became disastrous, I was furious at my father. At one point, I was living with him. My mother had me and my two sisters under, in a 2-bedroom. And that's what, it wasn't always like that. Me and my one sister were sharing a bedroom, and my other sister moved in from my father's, and I didn't want to be there, like that. And, my mom, was very weary about me drinking and very weary about me smoking weed and all that, and my father didn't give a damn. So, I moved in with him. He had the second and third floor of a house. So, I would come in, he'd be on the second floor. There were 2 bedrooms up in the attic. I had one, and my brother had one at one point. My sister had one at one point. But, I would come in and literally, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" Walk upstairs, and I would not speak to my father. When I left, I would say goodbye. I would give him the most very basic level of respect, and anything else that required a conversation, I avoided. So if I needed a screwdriver, I'd tear that house apart before I asked him for a screwdriver. I didn't even want to have a conversation with this man. I hated him. I felt like he was at the root of all my problems. And then he was in complete and total denial about what he did to us, what he did to my mother. Um, you know, how much he badmouthed my mother's side of the family, which was always going to be my family. I mean, he really just created this environment where it was just almost impossible to even like him, let alone love him. And it wasn't until I learned the true nature of God and what love truly is that I knew that I could love him and not like him. I don't like my father, and that hasn't changed. He's not a nice person. He's still a control freak. I pity him because he's 70 years old, and he still doesn't get it, man. His son will be 2 in a couple of weeks. He's 70. So, I mean, he remarried, I think, 3 times after my mom, and just had a baby a couple years ago because he's lonely. And it's funny because when I hated him, I was waiting for this day. I was waiting for the day where he would just be pathetic. He's had a bunch of heart surgeries, he's had a knee operation, hip operation. I mean, he's a pathetic sight. And now that he's like that, it's all I could feel for him is sorry. I'm not, the anger is gone. I just, if I could give him what I have, if I could give him my peace, if I could give him the understanding that I've gotten by being introspective, by being able to admit when I was wrong, by acknowledging that I had shortcomings and working on them, I would. Because the fear that was instilled in him as a child never left. It never left. And it's sad. It breaks my heart, and it's amazing. I never thought I would feel that way about him, that his condition could break my heart anyway. I mean, there were years that went by where I was very vocal about the fact that if he died, I wouldn't be at his funeral. 1, because I couldn't stand him, and 2, because there were going to be a bunch of people there whose hair he cut, whose kids he taught, who he taught, that were going to want to tell me how great this dude was and what he did for them in his life and this, that, and the other, and I'm going to be sitting there looking at him like, if you only knew, and I said, I'm not doing that. So my father, he's already dead to me, so I don't, I don't need to go to a funeral and have a bunch of people tell me how great he was, and I've moved past that. I've moved past that, and that is God's grace, man. That is the understanding of love. Something else I got was from Dr. King. I listened to a lot of his speeches, and he talked about Jesus' statement to to love your enemy and what that meant, and the 3 different types of love, which are eros, agape, and philia. And agape is the type of love that Jesus was talking about. That everybody is God's creation, and that you love them because God loves them, and that that you love them with the love of God. You don't have to like them. Love them and know that there are circumstances that they had to deal with that have created the person that they've become. And if they cannot find happiness, and if they can't find joy, and if they're making everyone around them miserable, stay away from them. But there's no reason to be angry, because trust me, nobody wants to be that person. And if you are that person, I mean, you're in enough pain by yourself. You don't need me coming down on you and judging you and all that kind of stuff, So, I mean, that's what I've grown through, as far as my father's concerned. There are going to be more stories about him, trust and believe. But I wanted to go deeper into that because it's so important and imperative to the way that my life went and the outlook that I had on a lot of things. So I just wanted to get that clear, and that's pretty much it for today. Later on, I'll talk about what I went through to get to the point that I'm at of forgiveness and true love and all that. But my father did a lot of damage, and my gratitude that I was able to find what he was not able to find is overwhelming, because I know it didn't have to be me. I could be him. Behavior like that is cyclical. It's a cycle, and it typically gets passed on, and it was passed on to me, and I was able to stop it. And I do have other members of my family that are still dealing with it, and that I hope can find what I found. So that's it for today. Have a blessed day. Be grateful in all things. Trust God. Take care.